Hey guys, what is up? SuperKmanrocks here, and I am here for my Week 6 LCK overview, analysis, and of course, at the end, my power rankings. It was a very fun week of LCK action, so I don't want to waste too much of your time, and I'm ready to jump right into the games. I am very excited. All I ask is that if you are too, let me know down in the comment section below. Let me know what game you were most excited to watch in this upcoming week. But let's not waste too much time. Let's go ahead and jump right into day one. And our first day of LCK action was kicked off with a series between Fredit BRION and DRX. And DRX taking the 2-1 series win after a relatively shaky start to the year. Definitely exactly what you wanted to see here. After, the last couple of weeks have certainly been up and down for this team. Game 1 was not, though. Game 1 was pretty much all Fredit BRION. And it was a little concerning because this is a team that has, barely won any games, let alone a series. They've won 3 games in total, so to take a game off of here, it feels not great. But you go back, you run it back for Game 2, and you look a lot better, mostly off of the back of Zika's quirky in the late game, just being able to blow people up. And then in Game 3, you are really, really able to beat them. Again, a relatively close game here. There were definitely points where it felt like Fredit BRION had a chance to win, just mostly due to how Morgan was playing in the top lane, which I'll give him a shout out for later. But again, Zika with a really good late game here on the Azir, doing an absolute boatload of damage along with that of Felios. They were just able to secure it here for DRX. And really the takeaway from all of this should just be that DRX definitely feels back. They definitely feel closer to being back than they did before. Obviously, Juhan played the first 2 games here. He played Game 1 and Game 2 here on the Poppy and on the Viego. And then in Game 3, Pyosik came back. We got a Xin Zhao game, and everything looks a lot better, I think, from DRX as a whole. Not saying that Pyosik isn't always, he can sometimes definitely be the problem for DRX. That's definitely something that isn't, completely absolved here. But they do look better, I think, when he is in than when Juhan is in. I think he's obviously a very good jungler when he plays right. And he was really, really good here in Game 3. But player of the series can go to no one else but Zika. He was really phenomenal both in Games 2 and Game 3 here for DRX. Big reason why they were able to win this series at all is his damage contributions. And yes, it's not always about damage, but in this series, I think without Zika, it would have been significantly more difficult for DRX to do the things that they wanted. Deft, I thought, had a good series as well. So did Kingen. Honestly, Kingen has kind of solidified over the past few weeks. He was really a problem for DRX a lot of spring here, and I think he really hasn't been as much so far in summer. He's really kind of just been there, even on a lot of different picks. Obviously, he pulls out the Lee Sin top here, Rascal Special here in Game 3, and looks pretty good on it. Honestly, does quite a bit of stuff on it, and it doesn't really ever put himself in a position where he can hurt his team. So I kind of like what DRX was able to do in this series overall. I just think they were looking a lot better. As for Fredit BRION, they continue to not be perfect. But honestly, there are some bright spots here. Game 1, I thought Umti actually had a really good game here on the Wukong. He would, of course, go back to that, both in Games 2 and 3. But, yeah, I think Game 1 here was a good game from Umti. He was able to get Lava ahead here on the Sylas. And honestly, the secret MVP, I think, of Bro in this series was Morgan, who was actually pretty good in both Games 2 and 3, even if he wasn't the most impactful. Game 3 especially, he was really fighting for this team's life. He was really a big reason why they were in it in the first place. Morgan continues to grow, I think, a lot from what we knew his reputation to be last year. And obviously, he had a pretty bad reputation. I think he was much better than that reputation last year. And I think this year, he has definitely shown that he has been honestly pretty good. Someone who, at times, can actually propel a team to potentially winning an LCK game. He really has that kind of talent. It's really difficult to do that from the top lane right now, but Morgan really had, he gave his team a shot here. They just unfortunately couldn't capitalize on it. Who continues to be bad for Bro is the bot lane here. Henna and Delight, especially Henna, who gets my dud of the series here. He continues to just not be good enough, I think, for this stage. Just walking into his skill shots, not really positioning well, Kaisa ulting in that final fight into 5 people with everything up and just dying. There are just so many different plays that I think Henna is going through right now that just, they're either confidence plays of I just feel doomed and I have to go for something, or he just doesn't have the best decision-making, which obviously we've known for a while that he doesn't have the best decision-making, but it's really, like, really apparent in these games, and so, yeah, I don't know what to tell you. He does not look good. Delight doesn't look much better. They just look like the worst bot lane in the LCK. There's really not a lot to say about it. Over and over and over again, they get brutalized. So even when Morgan and Umti and even Lava at times looks okay and starts to look more like their spring self than they do their summer self, Henna and Delight really have just taken this team's ceiling and pushed it back quite far. So definitely not something to look forward to there. But outlook-wise, Bro's the worst team in the league. There's really no other way to put it. They're not very good, and I don't really see them getting much better, even if these, let's say Morgan starts stepping up. I really don't see everybody on this team stepping up. There are a lot of people that have to get back to performances that they've been at in the past, and I just don't think it's going to happen. DRX is going to be very happy with this win, though, and they're going to be very happy to come away with the W here. Zika's going to be happy having a good series, and hopefully, Pioshik getting back in the starting lineup here can reinvigorate him, as we'll see later in the week. So, overall, a good win for DRX. Not the best win in the world, obviously, to lose a game to Bro, but at the end of the day, a win's a win. Moving on to the second series here of day one, we had NS RedForce taking on DAMWON Kia. DAMWON with the 2-0 series win. NS continues to suck, but let's talk about DAMWON first and foremost. This, I said 2-0 as a series win. This was a 3-0 series win for DAMWON. And the Chrono Break shenanigans continue in the LCK as somewhere in the middle of the hidden game 2, we decide that we need to stop for an hour, take a little bit of a break, and then just start again. And they do. They start again, and they crush him in both Game 2 and real Game 2. So, yeah, I mean, DAMWON looking really, really good. Showmaker's going to get my player of the series. His Game 1 was really phenomenal here on the Talia, was able to control the whole map. His Game 2, like his Game 1.5, I should say, was pretty good. Canyon was phenomenal in Game 1.5. Unfortunately, he's going to lose a player of the game for this, but in Game 3, Game 2, whatever you want to call it, Showmaker kind of steps back up again, this time on the Lissandra, and is able to control a lot of team fights, create a lot of plays. Want to give a big shout out to just all of DAMWON in general for just obliterating Nongshim in 3 separate games. I know they're not the best team in the world, especially right now, but to be able to beat them so handedly, like twice, 3 times even really here today, just shows the difference that these two teams have right now, because the difference in what DAMWON's able to put out and what Nongshim's able to put out is immense. So like I said, Showmaker with a really good series. Canyon was really, really phenomenal in that game that got scrubbed away. Unfortunately, his scoreline's going to look a lot worse because of the lack of that game in his catalog, but, Nuguri had a really good top lane game. Dekdom and Kellen were just better in the bottom lane by a lot, and so overall, DAMWON just the better team. As for Nongshim, they suck. Like, they're just so bad. They just don't have anything left. This bottom lane continues to, I know I called Henna and Delight the worst bottom lane in the league. I think Ghost and whoever he's with at this point have certainly given them a run for that money. Effort has been the worst player in LCK, I think, for most of this year. But Snowflower comes in and is even worse. Somehow, he has been even worse, especially in Game 1 here. He was awful on the Nautilus. He was so bad that they put Effort back in, who then continued to play bad on the Amumu. Actually, really not that bad. His game in Game 2 really wasn't that bad. This dud of the series thing is almost entirely for Snowflower in that Game 1, because it was just atrocious for Nongshim. But everybody else on this team continues to have problems. Dread got completely out jungled, Kana's just not Nuguri, and BDD is just not Showmaker. So at the end of the day, even with BDD on, Azir and Showmaker on a more supportive pick here in the Talia, like the Talia is going to do way more damage. And then BDD decides to go to the Talia. He wants to control the map, but the Lissandra is killing everybody left and right. So, like, what do? It just becomes very difficult for Nongshim to win in these kinds of circumstances, because as a team, they're just not good enough. But outlook-wise, Nongshim continues to look like maybe the worst team in LCK. I mean, them and Fredit BRION are really duking it out for that title right now, but they're right up there with them, and they absolutely deserve to be. For DAMWON, they continue to look pretty good, around that top 3, top 4. They definitely look like a team that is probably going to get one of those world spots, late in the year, but I don't know. I just don't know if I can see this team being a true contender for the LCK title. They definitely have the talent, and especially if Showmaker can really get back on board like he was in this series, he's kind of been off and on a lot of the start of this year. If he can get back on board like he was here, they definitely have a shot of taking down Gen.G and taking down T1. Just they haven't really been able to show that at all this year, so hopefully they can kind of figure out a lot of the issues that have been going on there, and especially bot lane, and kind of get a little bit more consistent so that they can finally start contending for that top spot where DAMWON is pretty used to being over the past few years. Moving on to day 2, kicking off day 2 action here, we had a rematch that I think a lot of people were really looking forward to, and that was, of course, T1 taking on the Kwangdong Freecs, KDF. KDF, the only team all year long in the LCK to be able to take a series off of T1. Were they able to do it again? Spoiler alert, you can already see it on the screen. I don't know why I'm hyping it up. No, they could not. T1 was just a little too strong this time around. However, they did take game 1. They did actually take game 1 off of the back of some really, really good plays from pretty much everybody on the team. Honestly, LM actually had a really good game 1 here on the Viego. But so did Fate. Fate was really, really solid on the Taliyah. And these are the two that I think have really been the most disappointing for KDF all year long. Obviously, Keen, I think in recent weeks has really disappointed a lot of people, but I really think it's been mostly, in my opinion, on LM and Fate just not being the players that everyone thought they were going to be when they joined this team. They were a lot better in game 1 here, and then games 2 and 3 happened. Game 2 was really all Zeus on Ornn, which is, Ornn's a really tough champion to really look like an absolute beast on, but he looked like an absolute beast on that champion. If you haven't seen the game, I highly recommend you go watch that. A really good game from Owner on Lee Sin. Lee Sin can be a little tricky in the meta right now, as I've talked about in a few videos. You really have to get ahead early, and Owner did a good job of making sure that he was able to get his team ahead early. Gumayusi had kills. He kind of threw it a little bit towards the end of that game, but he did have kills, and so he was doing okay there on the Draven. Faker on the Taliyah, you know, some good plays, but really at the end of the day, I mean, those Ornn ults at the end of the game were really phenomenal, even though Fate had another really, really good game here, even if LM did not. And then you move to game 3 here, and game 3 was a lot of back and forth. A very, very close game here. Gumayusi gets a little bit of a lead here in the bottom lane into the Kalista Renata, which I don't think a lot of people would have expected, but he gets a little bit of a lead here, helps Owner get off the ground, but KDF keeps fighting a really, really fun game here. Some really good picks from Fate here on the Ahri to keep KDF in the game. But at the end of the day, it comes down to a last team fight in the pit here, and everybody's getting picked off. You leave just Gumayusi left in there, and he does 8 billion damage here on the Draven. Able to clean up the fight, able to clean up the game, and able to pick up the win here for T1 in the end. A very, very fun series here just in general, especially Game 3. I would recommend, if you haven't seen this Game 3 yet, that you go and watch it. One of my favorite games of the week for sure here. But my player of the series is going to go to Zeus here on T1. Not only was he really good on the Ornn in Game 3, but he played a very interesting Gragas game in Ornn in Game 2, but he played a very interesting Gragas game here in Game 3. He was Flame Horizoned pretty easily, was given almost no resources, was pretty much out of the lane. He was 100 CS down on his jungler, 200 on his mid laner, and he was still ridiculously influential in these team fights with Chemtank and Fimbulwinter, and was just able to create a lot of space, not only for Faker to do some damage, even when he gets picked off, but for Guma to do a lot of damage here on the Draven as well, and, you know, gave an avenue for Owner. So, honestly, a pretty good series here for Zeus, just in general. And then KDF, you know, I think overall they played really well. Fate especially had probably his best series of the year here against Faker and against T1, which is a good sign, but the rest of the team just couldn't hold up their end of the bargain. LM was really good in Game 1, but outside of that, he was actually pretty bad, so he's going to get my dud of the series here. He continues to be a negative point for this KDF team. He's been one of the worst junglers in the LCK all year long, even when this team has been winning, and he continues that. Now, he just got out-jungled by Owner the entire series. Obviously, Owner one of the top 3 guys here in the LCK, but you gotta expect LM to start doing better at some point, or you're gonna need to find a different jungler. Like, this is what you did with Hoyt in the bottom lane. Hoyt was not playing up to snuff for this team, and so they decided they needed a different support. And Moham came in and Certainly Moham hasn't been the most seamless upgrade of all time, but I think he's probably had less awful plays than Hoyt has, at least throughout the year. So, yeah, I mean, maybe you just need a new jungler. I don't know, but KDF is really struggling in that regard. Outlook-wise, KDF continues to be okay. They continue to beat the bad teams and to lose to the good teams. They're looking a lot closer, I think, to like that 7 spot just out of playoffs now than I think they want to or they feel comfortable being there. But really, it's going to take one of the teams above them really slipping because the top 6 in the LCK feel pretty strong right now. And KDF just doesn't feel like they are on that mark. But if they play like this, I mean, if Fate can come out and play like this in other series against teams that are maybe a little worse than T1, then, I mean, bingo bango, like that, they're going to be back on track again. I'm not saying they'll be able to make playoffs because it's getting a little late in the season, but, you know, it'll at least start to help them, I think, in that regard. As for T1, they continue to look good. They conquer their demons here in KDF, who have really been their kryptonite forever. The Freecs have always been their kryptonite. And so for them to win this series, even if it was ridiculously close, I think is definitely a positive for T1. They're going to continue to top the power rankings for me, and they look good doing it here. Moving on to the second series here of Day 2 action, we had Hanwha Liiv Esports taking on KT Rolster, a 2-0 series win here for KT as they continue their hot streak that they have been on over the past few weeks. They climbed and fought their way back up to 500, and now they are finally above 500 for, I think, the first time all year long. A very fun thing for a roster that I think has shown flashes at points, but at the moment continues to look like the best that they have looked in a very long time, and that is off the back of pretty much all of their players really starting to step up and be more cohesive, I think, as a unit. We've talked a lot about the bot lane in the last few weeks. I have a reputation, I think, on this channel for being like anti-KT, and I don't know where I get that reputation. I'm not anti any team in the world, I really am not. But I have this reputation on the channel of being anti-KT because I think a lot of my analysis puts them lower than what a lot of people want them to be. I still think they're a very good team, and I think that there are a lot of things that they do right, and right now I do think they are looking good. It'll be interesting to see how they move forward because I still think they definitely have some weaknesses, but they're really starting to be more cohesive. The bot lane has really started to come alive, like I said. It's really been a unit more, I think, playing off of their strong players rather than just, oh, I hope one lane gets ahead and then they can carry us. Aiming and Life have obviously been very good. I've talked about them a lot last week. They have very good score lines this week. I don't think they were necessarily super impactful on the state of the game in this series. I think a lot of that can be said about topside here. Rascal was really good for KT Rolster in this one on 2 games of Sejuani. He's going to get my player of the series here. Usually Sejuani doesn't stand out, but this was a really good Sejuani performance, especially in game 1. He really obliterated Dudu in the top lane, and he really was able to help Cuz a lot in the jungle, help to fight on Fleek and get a lot of advantages. Not that Cuz needed it, he was better than on Fleek in this series by quite a considerable margin, which is a very good sign, but Rascal, I think, definitely doing his due diligence and doing his job as the tank to make sure that his team is in the best possible position to win, and I thought Rascal was a big reason why this team had such an easy time in game 1. Game 2 was a little bit, I think, of a different story. Not a completely different story, but a little bit. This was pretty back and forth, a pretty slow game. Cuz definitely had control of the map here, but they weren't really doing a lot with it. Aiming was able to, you know, get a few kills in the bottom lane early, but not really. Like, I think it was just one, honestly. But at the end of the day, you get to those team fights, you eventually get to the point of the game, even if gold is relatively even, you know, I mean, 1 or 2k gold isn't a huge gold lead by any means, and you walk into that fight, Vic was able to do a lot on the Talia, and I think that was really the opening part of that second game there, was the plays that Vikla was able to make on the Talia in the mid lane, Aiming able to clean up a lot of the kills here, Life doing a really good job on the Nami in these late game fights, which can sometimes be a problem for Nami, and Rascal, again, being a really good frontliner, and KT is able to get their second win here, so even if it wasn't quite as perfectly clean as the first one, it was still alright. But I think overall for KT, you're going to be happy with this. Rascal has one of his better games in quite a while. He's been up and down for this KT Rolster team, and he was their carry in spring by quite a lot. And so to see him kind of get back on form a little bit here on a Sejuani, you know, pair of Sejuani games where he wasn't necessarily even given the keys to the kingdom. He just played really well in this series. That's a good sign. Aiming and Life continue to be fine, even if they were given 2 really early game picks that they didn't necessarily like capitalize on early all the time. Still, you know, being able to fight late game as Lucian, I think, is definitely an important part of the champion, because usually you'll fall off, but if you can fight late, that's a good thing. And Aiming certainly did that. Vikla had 2 really good games on Taliyah, and Cuz had some of his more grounded games of the split, I will say. As for Hanwha Life, they're just not very good. They're in that cluster of bottom 3 teams here with Nongshim, with Fredit BRION. They're really not a team that I would expect to win a lot of games, and they don't here. They don't win a game. OnFleek continues to get out-jungled by pretty much everybody he plays against, which, of course, is a sad thing to see, as I thought at certain points last year he really showed a lot of promise, but all of that promise, in my opinion, has pretty much abandoned this team. Just not there anymore. He's going to get done of the series. Not so good. The Xin Zhao game in Game 1, I thought, was mostly him getting out-jungled by Cuz, but in Game 2, it was really just, like, map awareness. Like, he just was not good in Game 2. He wasn't the only member of the team that was bad. I thought Dudu got completely outclassed in the top lane, and Cheani and Vista just weren't able to keep up with Aiming and Life. You know, I'm not going to say that that's a complete shock, but it's definitely something worth noting. Outlook-wise for these 2 teams, like I said, Hanwha Life is going to be stuck down towards the bottom 3 pretty much for the entirety of the season. We've known that. Like, them, Nongshim, and Fredit BRION are all just right there. Like, they're all the same. None of them can win games, and when they all play each other, they all look bad even when they play each other. So I don't feel convinced that any of them are really that good, or any of them are going to be able to win a lot, but Hanwha's there. KT continues their rise up. I still have trouble putting them above teams like Liiv, SANDBOX, and DRX, mostly just because I think the consistency of all of their players has certainly been an issue. Vikla is not a top-tier mid laner. Cuz has definitely shown that he is not a top-tier jungler. We know that Rascal, Aiming, and Life can be good players, but we're going to have to see it on a more consistent basis. Aiming has really turned around his fortunes as of late, and Rascal, I think, during that time where Aiming has been good, has kind of been a little bit sour. This is the first time I think that both of them have looked good in a series in quite a while, and they're going to need both of them to look good if they want to continue to be a team that pushes for playoffs and wants to fight against the top 6. So, yeah, I think that there is a lot of good happening here in KT, and I know a lot of people are going to call me a KT hater, but at the end of the day, this is just how I see it. They still have a lot of growth to do, but this is a really, really, really good start for them. Moving on to day 3 here of LCK Week 6 action. We kicked off day 3 with the series between Liiv, SANDBOX, and Gen.G, a series a lot of people were really excited to watch because of the ADC matchup between Prince and Ruler, and it did not disappoint. Both members of those teams playing pretty well in this series. However, Gen.G is just the better team by quite a lot, and it was pretty clear. A couple things. Happy birthday, Doran. Really good to get a series win on your birthday. That's always got to feel pretty good. Moving on to what Gen.G did well, I thought Doran was actually a big part of that, especially in Game 1 on the Gnar. He was doing a lot into Dove's Gwen, who just wasn't really able to keep up. And then I thought Chovy also had a really phenomenal Game 1 here on the LeBlanc. Chovy's champion pool, I don't think quite has caught up to the meta. Obviously, he's much more of an aggressive player, and it's not really an aggressive meta in the mid lane right now. I think a lot of the aggressive picks just aren't great. Maybe with the exception of something like Ahri. I don't think a lot of like the assassin picks are great right now. But Chovy still picks the LeBlanc, is still able to do really well on it just because he's Chovy, and it doesn't really matter. So, yeah, a really good game from him. Ruler was fine in Game 1. Not perfect, but fine. But really, it was the solo lanes here for Gen.G in Game 1 that were really the beasts, the stars for these two teams, or for Gen.G in particular. And then in Game 2, it was really close. You know, Game 1 was obviously close. They win it with a kill deficit, but at the end of the day, you know, they were in control for a lot of it. And then Game 2 was back and forth, I thought, for a relatively good portion of that early game. They just had that moment, right, where it clicks and it's like, oh, okay, now Ruler's online, and he just wins the game. And he gets like 25 kills or whatever on Jinx, and is just able to close out the game. He looks really, really phenomenal. He's my player of the series here. Easily deserves it. He was really great in that game too. Was just kind of dominating the entire map, was taking advantage of Krako here on the Poppy, was taking advantage of Closer on the Victor. Honestly, the game was just his to take advantage of. Dove in the top lane as well. Certainly not the perfect series from him. But overall, honestly, just Gen.G looking really, really solid. Gen.G looking like a team that is one of the top 2 teams in the region. Chovy continues to kind of be a secondary piece for this team, but not all the champions that you would think. He still continues to pick things like the Ryze in Game 2, and I'm very vocal about how I think Ryze is a complete garbage champion right now that he does absolutely nothing for you. But, you know, if you want to pick him in your Chovy, who am I to say no? It's Chovy. Peanut pulls out the Morgana jungle in game 2. I really, really like that. A lot of really, really fun things there in game 2. I think Morgana jungle is actually kind of underutilized right now. Maybe not in pro, but just generally speaking in terms of like solo queue, it's a pretty good pick for high solo queue. But yeah, honestly, just a demolition here by the end of game 2. Gen.G looking really good. Ruler's my player of the series after a 75 kill game on Jinx in game 2. He's the better ADC between him and Prince. I don't think there was going to be a lot of debate over that going into it, but obviously, just in case you were wondering, Ruler is better. So happy birthday to Doran, and Ruler is a little better. As for Liiv SANDBOX, not the worst series in the world. Really, really isn't. They showed some good things, especially Prince in game 1 here on the Aphelios was able to kind of go toe-to-toe with Ruler. You could argue that he outplayed him in game 1, but it just didn't matter. Gen.G was just the better team. They were able to team fight exceptionally better. Chovy was able to blow people up there on the LeBlanc. And then Doran did a really good job with those Gnar ults, especially late game in those fights. So, yeah, honestly, just a really, really good game there from Gen.G's. Not necessarily Liiv SANDBOX's fault in game 1. But game 2 was a different story. I do not like this Victor pick for closer. I don't really like a lot of picks for closer. Pretty much any mage, I think closer has shown that he's just not an LCK caliber mid laner on. He has to be on assassins or more proactive picks for him to really look at all even remotely comfortable. You put him on the Victor here and he just looks awful, like genuinely awful. There are times this year where he has looked awful. There actually are quite a few times, in my opinion, this year where he has honestly just genuinely looked like a bad mid laner. This was one of them. He got completely outplayed here in game 2, but so did Dove and so did Krako. Not to take away from what they were doing. Dove's actually going to get my dud of the series here because unlike closer, Dove was also kind of a problem in game 1 here on the Gwen as well, just kind of not really accomplishing too much and giving Doran the opportunity to get ahead. So I think they all had relatively bad game 2s, but for me, Dove actually had a bad game 1, so he grabs the dud of the series award. Although, if it was all just based on one game, I thought closer had the worst game, which was game 2 here on the Victor. But Krako, again, kind of getting out-jungled by Peanut. Not the worst thing in the world. Peanut is one of the best junglers in the world, and he's proven that over and over and over again on his picks. But, you know, you would still want to see maybe a little bit more from someone who I think has really started to emerge in recent weeks as one of the best junglers in the region. You're hoping to get a little bit more out of that. Prince he was fine. Like I said, he had a good game 1. He was fine in game 2. Ruler just outclassed him a lot in game 2. Prince and Kale just weren't up to the task of playing against Ruler and Lehens, which is fine. Not a lot of people are, but outlook-wise, Liiv SANDBOX is still a good team. They're not, you know, a great team. They're not on the level of Gen.G or T1. Probably not on the level of DAMWON or, you know, maybe even DRX, but they're a good team, right? They're a team that should end up making playoffs. They're a team that might make it interesting if they continue to grow down the pipeline for Worlds. But the problem with this team is just that they are a one-man team. They are Prince. And when Prince is not winning the game for them, they just don't win games. And that's exactly what happened here. Closer lost them the game. Dove lost them the game. They just don't have the talent around him to be able to be a competitive, like, top-tier team. As for Gen.G, they are a top-tier team. They're one of the best teams in the world. They will continue to be one of the best teams in the world. Ruler, you could argue, has been the MVP of LCK so far this year. He has really genuinely been phenomenal. One of the best splits of his career. And then Peanut continues, you know, Peanut, Chovy, Doran, Lehens, like, what else do you want? Like, this team is stacked from top to bottom. They can win anywhere, and they show that they can win anywhere. And they will continue to prove that over and over again up until playoffs come around, in which case, hopefully, they can maintain their momentum. But, you know, sometimes teams with Peanut and Chovy can sometimes fall off towards that end. So, hopefully, when playoffs come around, they can live up to the hype and make finals and really give T1 a run for their money. But, you know, we're going to have to wait until that time period to see if that can actually happen. Moving on to our second series here of Day 3 action. We had a matchup I think I was very much looking forward to. Probably my series of the week that I was looking forward to. And that was, of course, DRX versus DAMWON KIA. Both of these teams really showing a lot of good things, not only in this series, but throughout the season so far, but also ups and downs. We've seen both of them win this week, and DRX actually able to pull out the 2-1 series win here. They have DAMWON's number, and I actually think a lot of it comes back to the fact that DAMWON really struggles with early aggression, and DRX and a lot of the good teams that are around them really do a good job at applying that early aggression. So, let's talk about the series. Game 1 was Pyosik all the way. He gets subbed back in here for Juhan earlier in the week, and that proves to be the right decision here. He gets Lee Sin in game 1. He's able to create so much pressure early game, not only mid lane, but also bot lane to help get Deft ahead on that Yasuo, and Zika's getting some few kills. What am I talking about? What? That's not English. Zika also was getting a few kills here on the Sylas, so a pretty good game 1 here for DRX off the back of Pyosik's early plays on that Lee Sin. And then in game 2, it was kind of a flipped story. DAMWON was a lot better off of the fact of Canyon just owning the map. Pyosik goes to the Poppy here, which is a pick that he's generally relatively good on, but just no match for Canyon's Trundle, which is really just something that has been a problem. I think Canyon has somehow been ridiculously underrated, I think, for a lot of this year so far. I think a lot of people are talking about this as one of Canyon's worst years, and if this is one of Canyon's worst years, then, I mean, that just shows you how good Canyon is as a player, because pretty much all of DAMWON's wins have been off of the back of Canyon being really, really good and being able to control the map, even if he's not been the focal point for a lot of the carrying of the wins. You know, if this is one of his worst seasons of all time, I'm a bad analyst. You know what I mean? Like, that's just, I don't get that. I don't get it at all. But he had a phenomenal game here in game 2. He continues to look really good. Showmaker has a good game on the Sylas, as he typically always does. Moving into game 3, that's where DRX really takes control back of this series. Pyosik gets his Lee Sin again, and Deft gets his Jinx. And those two picks just make it so the game was pretty much over before it even started. Draft was really not even close here. Nuguri plays 3 games of Gangplank in the top lane and doesn't really do a lot on them. Obviously, he goes the Bruiser build all 3 games that people on Reddit seem to absolutely despise. I completely understand the build. I don't always get it into something like Gnar. Like, I get the principle of it. Typically, when you want to go Bruiser on Gangplank is when you want to build, like, is when you are going into tanks and you typically know that your laning phase really isn't going to be about damage. Like, you're really never going to be able to have kill pressure one-on-one against Gnar in this case, even though I disagree with that statement, but that was clearly what Nuguri thought. And so he went the Bruiser build because that's going to be more useful overall in terms of side laning and in terms of late game pressure in these team fights. It's going to be useful for him to survive longer. I get it against things like Sejuani, Ornn. I really understand it against picks like that. Gnar is kind of on the fence. I do think I can understand it here, but I personally would still go the damage build against Gnar because you can kill Gnar in the right circumstances as Gangplank. But I think overall, like, that matchup there was pretty meh, and that was really your only power point here for DK. You have the Corki, you have the Aphelios. You're relying so heavily on this late game push. Going up against a Lee Sin, you just never were going to have early game pressure, and Pyosik did a phenomenal job of taking advantage of that, getting Deft ahead, getting Zika ahead. They were just able to snowball the game out of control. A really, really good series here from Pyosik is going to earn him my Player of the Series award. He comes back into the lineup here, getting the full-time starting job back, and he looks reinvigorated. You know, he was, you know, I don't want to say he was just straight up better than Canyon, because Canyon had a relatively good series as well. Probably the best performing member of DAMWON in this series, but he was really, really good. He was phenomenal, and he looked like one of the top junglers in the region again, which obviously we know he can do that. We know he has games where he can just be one of the top junglers in the region, and that's exactly what he was here. Big shout out to Deft. When he gets Jinx, it's just like GG's for the rest of the league. Really, there's just like no shot that anybody can do anything to him on that Jinx, at least in comparison to what he's able to put out. So big shout out to Deft on Jinx. There was this one specific play I remember where he sidesteps perfectly the last Corki rocket from Showmaker, and then perfectly W's at the exact time that someone's coming out of stasis, and it's like, oh, okay, this is how a master plays Jinx. And it's just really, really awesome to watch. So yeah, Deft and Pyosik were really the carries here, but that's not to say everybody else didn't play well. Good series from Zika, good series from Beryl. Honestly, even good series from Kingen in the top lane. As for DAMWON, like I said, I thought Canyon was probably the best performing member of the team here, but Showmaker actually had quite a few good games, I think, overall. It just wasn't a complete series from Showmaker. Definitely hitting some more of those rockets in that last game maybe would have changed the fate of what a lot of these teams were able to do. But really, if you're looking at where I think the team went wrong, I think that the bot lane definitely got outclassed in Game 3 here. Kellen is going to get my dud of the series here. He was on the Nautilus in Game 3. And, you know, obviously it's his job to go in and potentially die, but, man, he was picking some fights that he absolutely should not there. You have to be a little bit more trigger disciplined when you're playing hook champions, and especially strong engaged champions like Nautilus, into something like a Leona, and he just didn't have that. he would go in, he would start fights, and his team would get punished for it. And it definitely wasn't a good look. So Kellen is going to get my dud of the series here. Dekdom wasn't much better. He was just outplayed by Deft pretty much the entirety of the series. Deft continues to look like one of the best AD carries. Dekdom continues to look like somewhere in the middle. But overall, outlook-wise for these two teams, I had them at 3 and 4. DRX now 2 times has beaten DAMWON. I'm not sure if I truly believe that DRX is like that much of a better team than DAMWON, but this 2-0 week definitely helps them out a lot. This loss isn't going to be catastrophic for DAMWON because really it is against a good team and a team that we know can be a world caliber team, and we would expect to be a world caliber team. But at the end of the day, you would really hope that they could win games like this. Like I said earlier, you want to see them go up against teams like Gen.G and T1 because they're DAMWON, but right now they're not even really in a predicament to be able to contest teams like DRX. So definitely a lot to improve on for DAMWON, but DRX is going to be very, very, very happy with this win, and they're going to hopefully carry that momentum into the rest of the season, hopefully. Jumping into day 4 of Week 6 LCK action. We kicked off day 4 with a series between the top team and bottom team in the standings, and that is, of course, Fredit BRION taking on T1. And T1 does take the 2-1 series win, although Bro takes a game, which they're going to be happy about, I imagine. They pick up, actually, 2 games this week, which is huge for them. That's something they're probably not used to, but T1 is going to be able to take the series after a Game 1 loss, which feels pretty typical for them at this point against the bottom teams in the league. They just seem to do this. They drop a game for no reason and then turn it on. So, yeah, let's talk about what T1 did well this series. So, in Game 1, honestly, it was a lot of not so good from T1. It was a lot of weird misplays, especially from Owner in the jungle. He has series like this where he just sometimes isn't great. Not exactly sure what it comes from, but at the end of the day, you know, it is what it is. But it was really off the back of the bot lane of Fredit BRION actually just being really, really good for this team. They continue to be wildly inconsistent, as they have been pretty much all year long at this point. They have a lot of ups, and they have a lot of downs, which we will see throughout the series. But in Game 1, they were really good. Henna and Delayed actually did a really good job of playing against Gumayusi and Keria in lane. And then they just got to the point where Kalista and Mumu was just kind of too strong. Lava had a lot of pressure on the Ryze around the map, and you were just able to win the game. Even if I hate the Ryze pick, it worked pretty well here. Game 2 was much more in T1's favor. Definitely a T1 game from pretty much everybody involved. Faker had a phenomenal one here on Sylas. He had a particular play here where he steals the Rakan ultimate, charms 4 people, and puts down a pink ward right on top of Henna so that he can't do the move click thing. And just, like, the mechanics and the speed with which players at this level can do that kind of stuff, and I know I say players at this level when referring to Faker, and not everybody's going to be Faker, I get that, but, like, just in general, the fluidity and precision with which players at the top level can play this game is absolutely absurd. He was really, really phenomenal in that game. Owner had a much better bounce back game here on the Nocturne in Game 2, a pick that we're really not seeing at all globally, but it actually did pretty well. You would imagine it would do pretty poorly into Poppy, because she can actually just block quite a bit of what Nocturne wants to do. But it didn't. It really wasn't a problem. So shout out Owner. He had a good game here. And then Game 3 was a little bit back and forth, but really it was T1's to lose. And they didn't. They did not lose it. Zeus just got so much damage off on that Gangplank. He was able to absolutely obliterate pretty much everybody on Fredit BRION to a 2-1 series win here. My player of the game is going to go to Faker. Player of the series, I should say. Faker was just so good here. His mechanics are unreal. He had that stupid play in Game 3 that everybody's talking about where he, as Galio, just walks up to Delight on the Rakan and just full taunt combo kills him. Delight had absolutely everything up and just stood there and let Galio do everything to him. It was very funny to watch. But even outside of that, Faker, I thought, had a really, really solid series here against Fredit BRION. He continues to look better and better, I think, as the weeks go on. I think at the beginning of the season, he was kind of looking like a little bit, I don't want to say as a weakness for this team, but when summer had started, he really wasn't in peak form yet. It really feels like he's upgraded his game in the last few weeks, and especially this week here in Week 6. He was really phenomenal for T1 in both of their series. Zeus also with another really good series. He continues to look like the best player on this T1 team, and that is not an easy feat. There are a lot of good players here, but Zeus has just been phenomenal. That Gangplank game in Game 3 was really disgusting. And like I said, Owner kind of bounced back after a really, kind of rough Game 1. For Fredit BRION, there were a couple people I think you could give dud of the series to. It's going to go to Morgan for me in the top lane. who I think has definitely shown good things for this Fredit BRION team. Someone who is definitely trying to make good plays. I definitely see a lot of that in him, but he got absolutely blasted by Zeus in Game 3. And he just died a lot more than was necessary, I think, in Game 2 on the Gwen here. I think you could realistically give this to Delight as well. But at the end of the day, Delight still had at least a good Game 1. I thought he was a big reason why that team was able to win was his Amumu plays in Game 1. So if there is, like, any sort of toss-up, any sort of debate as to who should get that Dud of the Series award, unfortunately, is going to go to Morgan here because of Delight's Game 1. But overall, I just think Bro is just not on this level. Outlook-wise, I'm not really surprised that they weren't able to keep up with T1. I don't think there were a lot of teams that are. But, I mean, taking a game off of them, not that bad, especially with Hanwha and Delight coming and playing actually some pretty good League of Legends. It's a heartening thing to see, I think, for a team like Fredit BRION to actually be able to go up against T1 and not look completely hapless. But, you know, Morgan, Delight, not the best series overall, just a pretty good one game from them. As for T1, outlook-wise, like, they're going to be happy they got the win here, because if they lost, that would have been awful. But at the end of the day, like, this is what happens. T1 struggles against good teams. Or, I'm sorry, T1 struggles against bad teams, and they look phenomenal against good teams. It's just how they roll. So for them to randomly drop a game here to Fredit BRION, it's not really too surprising for me. I expect that they'll be able to turn this around by their next game. I'm not really too worried. So, yeah, honestly, outlook-wise, T1's still the best team in the league. Fredit BRION still arguably the worst. Like, not a lot has changed from this series for me, even if it was a little bit back and forth at points. Moving on to the second series here of Day 4, we are looking at KT Rolster taking on Kwangdong RedForce. KT with a 2-1 series win. They do drop a game here, which isn't the best, but at the end of the day, they are able to beat up on Kwangdong just like everybody else in the league has over the past few weeks. They do come away with the W here in 3. They are able to take games 1 and 3. Dropping game 2 in the middle, it happens, I get it, but at the same time, you would hope that it wouldn't, just because, you know, it's Kwangdong at the end of the day, but there were good things to talk about for KT here. Most notably, aiming still continuing to be really good and continuing to have a pretty good season so far. The Twitch game in Game 1 was disgusting. I really like the Twitch pick. Just in general, I think relatively underused globally. Usually, I'd really only want to see it paired with something like a Yuumi, but it did okay with the Renata in Game 1. I think you can be aggressive with that, but just maybe not as aggressive as I would have hoped you would have been, but still, a really good game from aiming in Game 1 to give KT the first win. And then in Game 2, Kwangdong actually pulls out a win off of the back of BDD's Rise, which I certainly would not have seen coming. This is a champion that I think by all intents and purposes is like Giga Weak right now, just all the time. Like, it's not a good champion, and it won't be a good champion for quite a while. But we're still seeing play, and it's because these players have played so much Rise and they know how this champion works. A really good game from BDD here. Honestly, there's really nothing else to say. Dread looked good on the Trundle, and Ghost looked alright on the Aphelios. Honestly, this was as good as you could get here. It was finally a good game from Kwangdong, probably the first one that they've had on stage in weeks, maybe even months. And then Game 3, they're right back to being exactly who we thought they were. Vikla has a really good game here on the Silas. He's going to get player of the game for Game 3, and I think he deserved it. Although Rascal also had a really good game here on the Gwen, just kind of obliterating Kana in that top lane matchup. Rascal was just much better pretty much every game, but especially here in this Game 3. And another good game here from Aiming and Life. Aiming's going to get my player of the series here. Like I said, a fantastic Game 1. And he still had a pretty good Game 3 here on the Aphelios, just not quite the unbelievable game-breaking impact he had on the Twitch in Game 1. So, still a really, really good series. He continues to have one of his best series, or best years of his career, if not the best split of his career, right? Like, he's been really phenomenal here in summer, and it's been awesome to watch his breakout. Vikla continues to look like the right decision here in the mid lane. This team has gotten infinitely better ever since Vikla joined as their mid laner. I'm not saying Arya was the problem, because a lot of things on this team have gotten better, but I am saying that Vikla is definitely a part of the reason why this team is now looking so good, and why they are on kind of the hot streak that they've been on. They're 7-5 right now, which is phenomenal. And Rascal continues to look a lot better as well. He had a really good series earlier in the week. He looks good in this one as well. Absolutely decimates Kana in Game 3 here on the Gwen. Just a really, really good series. He had a really good Game 1 on the Ornn as well. He's starting to look like he's getting his form back. This KT Rolster roster could be very dangerous come playoff time if they continue to play like this. A lot of things are clicking for them. As for Nongshim, they continue to be bad. However, they are able to win a game off of BDD's rise. He does go back to, you know, the more passive control mage style. You know, he has the Azir in game 1, which he gets blasted on. I know it's a signature pick, but he doesn't have it right now. I love him to death on Azir. He's probably the best Azir of all time in pro play, but right now, he just can't play that champion. I don't know if Azir is just weak or not in the state where BDD can do anything on it, or if it's just a confidence thing. But whatever it is, like, you need to stop picking him that champion because it's just not working. And then in game 3, he had a rough one here on the Victor, I think, as well. But really, my dud of the series can go to none other than the support position. Again, they've both struggled so much. Snowflower had a rough game 3 here on the Tom, and Effort had a really rough game 1 here on the Tom. I can't tell you which one had a worse game here. Snowflower played more games, and he actually was a decent contributor in that win here on Nautilus, but at the same time, like, Effort was so bad, and Snowflower was honestly so bad in game 3 that they still deserve my dud of the series here. They still looked really garbage. Kana got completely outplayed in game 3 here by Rascal. Really just, while there are bright spots here, like BDD playing well, and Dread having a relatively good game too, I think they're all kind of outdone by the fact that they can't win this series and that they all fall apart in game 3, which they've done all year long. Even in the series where they were, like, before we knew they were garbage. This team has never had game 3s that have felt particularly effective, but not having a good support or not having an LCK even playable support at the moment will definitely influence that. As for the outlooks of these two teams, Nongshim sucks. This is definitely a something. Like, they won a game. That's something. It's the first time they've done that in quite a while, so it's exciting to see that. You've got to be positive towards that, but at the end of the day, they couldn't pull away with the series win, and the same problems that they've been looking at all year long continue to persist for them. As for KT Rolster, they're continuing their hot streak here. They moved to 7-5, the best record they've had in a very long time. You've got to be excited as a KT fan, but maybe not too excited, because you don't want this team to finally start falling down like they always do. So, right now, we're just going to sit here, and we're going to see if KT can maintain this level of play. Aiming's been phenomenal. Rascals continue to get back to where he was. Vikla has been a very pleasant surprise for this team. If they can continue to play like this, they're going to actually be a little bit of a threat come playoff time. Jumping into the final day of Week 6 LCK action, we kicked off our Day 5 with a matchup between the Kwangdong Freecs and Liiv SANDBOX that LSB is able to take in 2 games, continuing their really solid run throughout Summer Split so far. This was a little bit of a different win for them, because really it wasn't based a lot on early game leads. In fact, in Game 2, they really did not have an early game lead. In fact, they didn't even have a kill lead by the end of the game. They just did a really good job of maintaining what their win condition was and playing towards that, and I think that's a really good sign. And their win condition pretty much in every game so far has been Prince. However, in this one, honestly, big shout out to Closer, who was given a little bit of the keys. He had a phenomenal game 1 here on the Akali. He just got so far ahead that he was able to take over the entire game. And then here in game 2, he had a really fun one on the Sylas as well, was able to do a lot of damage in those late team fights, really shutting off what Fate was able to do even when Fate was able to catch quite a few people out. It wasn't a perfect series by any means from Liiv SANDBOX. Still definitely some problems. Keen was able to get a pretty massive lead in game 2, which of course he would throw, but we'll talk about that. You know, not perfect, but overall I think it's still a really good look for Liiv SANDBOX. Closer is actually going to be my player of the series here. He was really dominant on that Akali in game 1 and still really influential on the Sylas in game 2. This was probably one of his best series as a pro, especially ever since he left T1. He's very much been someone who's been on my problems list all year long, someone who I think has been, you know, pretty wildly overrated by a lot of the community because of the time on T1 and because he's so young and this expectation that he's going to grow. I don't think it was set in stone that he was going to be able to grow, but he gets 2 of his more comfortable champions here in the Akali and the Sylas, 2 more fight-oriented, assassin-oriented picks, which is definitely the style that I think he prefers over this control mage style where I don't even know if he can play that at an LCK level, but he looks good here on the Assassins. He finally gets that chance, and he does look good. Prince continues to be okay. He made a few mistakes in this series. Definitely not the same guy that we've seen over the past few weeks and over the course of Summer Split, just kind of be hyper-dominant, no mistakes. He walked into a Talia shove and just died. And a lot of times I think he was protected by Thresh Lantern throughout the series. Kale, I thought actually had a really good game too here. Was a big reason why Prince was able to, you know, play so freely. But you know, at the end of the day, he still was able to get the job done, so I can't complain too much there. Overall, like I said, Closer and Kale had a really good series. Krako had some moments. Had some moments where he was good, had some moments where he was bad. Same with Dove. But moving on to KDF. KDF is just, they feel so close to being like a cohesive team, but they're not there. Game 1 really was never there. They were just outplayed by Liiv SANDBOX early. Closer got way too far ahead on the Akali, and he could kill anybody in the game. Game 2, though, they should have won. You had 4 kills on this Fiora early game. And unfortunately, I don't know who's calling the shots on this team. Hoyt, by the way, I never noted. Hoyt was back in for KDF in this series. I'm not sure if that's a plus or a minus, but he was back in. And whoever was shot calling for KDF this game, unfortunately, just got it wrong. You have a 4-kill Fiora, no side lane pressure. You decide to group over and over again. Eventually, this Aphelios gets online and is just able to delete your entire team because he has protection not only from the Thresh, but also from the Poppy. And so there's really not a lot you can do to actively get on him, and you eventually just lose the game. Not sure whose call that was. That 4-kill Fiora for Keen could have been a massive problem in side lanes, but alas, here we are. Not really something there. I do want to give my dud of the series here, though, to Elim, who continues to just look lost. He continues to just not really have a lot of avenues. He doesn't really seem to do any part of the game well. He's very far behind in the early game. He doesn't really seem to want to make early plays, and he doesn't seem to link up with his team all that well. But at the same time, it's not like he particularly team fights well either. He just looks like he's lost. He doesn't really have map pressure. He doesn't really do anything for this team. And I think it's definitely time to start looking at a replacement. I don't know who your Challengers jungler is. Unfortunately, I don't have enough time to watch LCK Challengers, but you know, maybe if they're okay, or at least reasonably okay, just give him a shot, because right now it is just not working out for Elim in the LCK. He's not had a good run of it. He's going to get my dud of the series, and really outside of that, it's just Keen. Keen really should have been able to dominate that second game, and he just, those decisions to group over and over again really cost them, and that's something that I think has always been Keen's problem, is decision-making. I think when he has a good decision-maker on his team, he can often look good, especially in late-game team fights, but when he is left to just kind of be that guy for the team, he can definitely struggle, and that's what we saw in this one as well. So, outlook-wise for these two teams, KDF continues to solidify its spot below the top 6, but also above the bottom 3. I think they're probably going to sit in there for probably the rest of the year. Liiv SANDBOX continues to be interesting. They're going to try and make a push for top 4. I'm not exactly sure they're talented enough. Obviously, I think good teams are going to know to ban out Akali and ban out Sylas and ban out these more aggressive picks on Closer and force him onto these control mages. And really, it's just not something that I'm really confident at all that he's going to be able to pull off. And if you focus bot lane over and over and over again, that's shown to be a little bit of an issue for this team, because that's Krako's game plan, is to get Prince ahead. And when that doesn't happen, it can sometimes be a little bit of a problem. So definitely still some things to learn from Liiv SANDBOX, but at the end of the day, a win's a win. A 2-0 win is a 2-0 win as well. And they're going to be sitting near the top of the standings. They're going to be very happy for that. And their fate really is going to be in their hands when it comes to playoffs. That's going to go ahead and bring us to our final series of the week here in the LCK. And we ended off our week with a series between Hanwha Life Esports and Gen.G. And pretty much everybody could have told you how this one was going to go just before any game even started. Gen.G absolutely obliterates them. They look like the better team from moment one, especially in game 1. Really not even close. Off the back of Peanut and Ruler just being awesome, right? Like, I get it, you know, a lot of the narrative surrounding how well Gen.G is going to do at an international level, I think, comes around Chovy. And that's rightfully, I get it. Chovy's arguably one of the best players in the world, right? Not what arguably one of, arguably the best player in the world, right? And he's a good player, but you watch how this team has played over the past few months, and when they've really started to step up, it has been off of the back of Peanut being awesome, and off of the back of Ruler just being the best AD carry in the world. And really, that's the formula that I think Gen.G has found, where Chovy can just kind of be this extra piece, and I know that's weird to say, but he can just kind of be this extra piece that you sink into an already phenomenal team, and you're just going to win, right? You have Doran picking the Akshan here in game 2 to be a little bit more aggressive. He gets punished a little bit for it in that 1v1 against Dudu, but at the end of the day, it's stuff like that, where like Doran can be free to pick something super aggressive like Akshan in the top lane because they can play through it. And, you know, Ruler can be free to pick a super greedy pick in the bot lane like Twitch, and they can play through it, right? And Chovy doesn't have to be the one getting all this attention, even though he's one of the best players in the world. It really is an amazing dichotomy that Gen.G have. It reminds me so much of what DAMWON was able to do the last few years where, yes, like, Showmaker's really good with resources, but at the same time, like, he's so good that he doesn't absolutely need them in order for them to win games. And that's really what it feels like Gen.G has become, is every lane can win, and that includes Chovy in the mid lane. But really, Peanut was phenomenal here. He's going to get my player of the series. He was great in Game 1 on the Wukong. He was arguably even better in Game 2 here on the Jarvan, where he was just able to take over the entire map. Really good combos here from him and Chovy, and, you know, Ruler was just able to take over the game in Game 1 on the Twitch. So big shout out to him and Lehens. Lehens, I give Lehens a lot of shit, and I think that there are times where he deserves it, but he's really synced up with Ruler really, really well. And I think that them being the best bot lane in the LCK is not just Ruler being the best bot laner in the world, right? Like, Lehens does get some credit for that, and he had a really good series here as well. Definitely in that Game 2 on the Tom, he had a lot more fun plays than he did on the Yuumi. But, yeah, overall, Gen.G's just dominant. They're scary. They're terrifying. I would never want to play this team because they can beat you from pretty much any avenue, and they showed that off here. As for Hanwha, they're a bad team. I do like the fact that they finally feel like they can go to Willer. I don't really know what Willer did to get into the doghouse so much. On Fleek has been genuinely terrible for this Hanwha Life team pretty much all year long. And at this point, you just have to go, okay, well, Willer can't be that bad, right? Like, this is someone who went to Worlds last year. Granted, he wasn't the reason they went to Worlds, and he wasn't phenomenal when they were at Worlds, but this is someone who at least I think has some experience in the LCK and at least gives you some level of upside. I would expect to see him a lot more throughout the rest of the year. He was much better in Game 2 than On Fleek was in Game 1 here. But my dud of the series for Hanwha Life is going to go to Vista here in the support position. His Game 1 on Lulu was just atrocious. Was getting abused by Ruler on that Twitch over and over and over again. Really just, it's a tough matchup, obviously, because if you want to even get vision or even play remotely in, you know, the game at all, you have to be in positions where Twitch can kill you with that invisibility. And unfortunately, Vista just got caught over and over and over again. So Vista, not so good in that one. He was a little bit better in Game 2 on the Ashe, but didn't really accomplish much. Not that anybody did here in Game 2 other than Dudu with that trade in the top lane. And Karis a little bit on the Taliyah, but overall, just not a great game, not a great series here from Hanwha Life. They continue to look like one of the worst teams in the league. I think outlook-wise, they're in the bottom 3. I've always talked about, in the LCK, it very much feels like there are tiers. You've got the top 2 teams. You've got T1 and Gen.G, and then you got DAMWON kind of in their own tier at 3, feeling most consistently like they're a team that will go to Worlds, but who knows if it'll be as the 3 or the 4 seed. And then you've got this clump of, you know, you could maybe put DRX in there. I'd put DRX in there, but a lot of people wouldn't. And then you've got this clump of teams from like 4 to 6 that are fine. You know, you've got DRX there, but you've also got SANDBOX. You got KT Rolster. Hell, you've even a little bit got KDF. And then this bottom 3 cluster of Hanwha Life, Nongshim, and Fredit BRION that are just not competitive. And Hanwha Life continues to be in that tier. They will be in that tier forever. I would expect to see more Willer, just as we're seeing more Cheani here in the bot lane. I just don't really see a reason where you don't go with the upside here. And Willer is definitely the upside over on Fleek, so I would expect to see more of that. As for Gen.G, they're one of the best teams in the league, one of the best teams in the world. They will continue to be that. I think you can make an argument that this team right now is the strongest they've ever been because they can play through every single lane, like I said. I would not know how to draft against this team at all, not know how to play against them, so it'll definitely be interesting to see what happens with them going forward. They have so much confidence in their abilities and so much confidence in how they are playing right now that I can't imagine there are a lot of teams in the world that can genuinely take games off of Gen.G right now. They are looking that good, so hopefully they can continue that. All year long of that for Gen.G would be just so phenomenal. I'd love to see if this team could actually win LCK. All right, that is going to do it for my Week 6 LCK overview and analysis of all 5 days, all 10 series of LCK action. Up on the screen right now, you're going to see the updated LCK standings from 1 to 10. Any numbers that are highlighted in purple will show you the teams that have locked in playoffs, which means right now, both Gen.G and T1 have locked in making the playoffs here. They play next week. That's going to be a really, really fun matchup between those two teams. In the first column, you're going to see my power rankings. In the second column, you're going to see how those have changed from last week. I would usually say let's go over the biggest risers and fallers, but actually this week there are none. There is no riser, there is no faller. My power rankings are staying exactly the same as what they were last week. I think a lot of people are going to want DRX to maybe slingshot DK in the power rankings. I need to see another week of it. They have these weeks, right, where they go, like, bam, we're going to absolutely destroy. Like, bam, we look awesome. And then the week after, they just look like absolute shit. And I end up ping-ponging them around for right now, they're going to sit here at number 4. They're going to stay there. DK stays at number 3 reluctantly, although, you know, consider them very, very close. But everybody else stays the same. I really didn't feel like there was a lot of need to change anybody this week. Nobody really surprised. There were not a lot of upsets. Nobody really changed expectations. Everybody played pretty much exactly as I expected them to. And so the power rankings for me stay the exact same, and they are up on the screen right now. But let's go ahead and talk about my player of the week and my dud of the week. My player of the week in week 6 for the LCK is going to go to Ruler on Gen.G. The second time this year that he's won that award. He won it in week 3 as well. So a very, very good week for Ruler here in week 6. Just another dominant week. Gen.G continues to plow through a lot of the competition and look phenomenal while doing it. My dud of the week this week is going to go to Elim on KDF, on the Kwangdong Freecs. He just continues to look like one of the worst junglers in the league, and I would expect this team to look at avenues at replacing him as soon as possible, because really, there's a chance that this team could have been a playoff team, but I think Elim has kind of dragged them out of that conversation at this point. He had a really, really bad week this week. So yes, week 6 awards. Dud of the week for me is going to go to Elim on KDF, and player of the week is going to go to Ruler on Gen.G. But that's going to do it. If you guys enjoyed, please go ahead and leave a like. It really does mean a lot for the channel, and I really, really do appreciate it. Let me know what you guys' series of the week was, who your player of the week, your dud of the week, all of that was down in the comment section below. You know, I love chatting it up with you guys. But with that being said, I hope you all are having a great day. I hope you continue to have a great day, and I will see you all later.